Hello and welcome to Hot Issues. We are taking a look at the power situation in the country. We're going to look at electricity. Are we generating enough? And if you're generating enough, what is the problem? Is it distribution? Is it a combination of problems with generation and problems with distribution? But we'll be focusing a lot more attention on the Bui Power Authority. Welcome to Hot Issues. We're looking precisely at Dumso. Why is it that the Bui Dam is said to have come on stream and yet we are not getting enough electricity in our homes? We are very, very fortunate this week to have the man himself in the studio, the Chief Executive of the Bui Power Authority, Mr. Jabesh Amissah Atta. Sir, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
What is happening at Bui? Are you generating? And if you're generating, how much are you generating?
Bui is generating. It's generating according to the schedule that we have agreed. And it's doing that perfectly well and according to the plans that we have. I know that there has been quite a bit of misunderstanding about the contribution of Bui and some numbers, and I hope that we can very quickly lay that to rest and explain what it is. I know that quite often the question has been that we had said all along that the Bui plant was capable of 400 megawatts. Now, what is it running? What is it doing? Why are we still having Dumso? The answer is straightforward. The plant is capable of 400 megawatts. Everything has been done, all the engineering, all the construction, the commissioning has been done, and the plant is capable of 400 megawatts. But we deal with water. And so the amount of water that we get in any year, the rainfall that we get in any year, is that determines the amount of energy we can produce over the whole year. Mm-hmm. So at this time of the year, we have received all the rains we'll get in this rainy season. The rainy season is over, and we know the level we have. Now we have to use that water judiciously until the next rainy season. We have to use it throughout the dry season. Now what it is that if we run all the 400 megawatts, we will drain the water in a few months. And then we will not be able to produce anything else for the rest of the dry season. So we cannot produce the 400 continuously all the way through. So we have to see how much water we have and plan how we will use it judiciously so that the water can last us through the dry season. So right now, together with the planners of the national network, we have determined that the best help that Bui can contribute to meeting the demands of the country is for Bui to provide 200 plus megawatts every evening to support the evening peak. So in the evenings, it comes on fully with about 250 megawatts to support the peak. And after the demand goes down, they tell us when to shut down and conserve the water. So that is the role Bui is playing now. And every year after we get the rain season, we'll have to determine how much water we have received and plan how we can use it effectively and optimally for the rest of the dry season until the next rains. So that's what happens at Bui. The machines are capable of 400, but if we run it at 400, let's say that supposing we have water such that we can run it at 400 for 1 month or 2 months, then you can choose. Either you want us to run it at 400 megawatts for 2 months, or if we run it at 200 megawatts, we can run it for 4 months, or if we run it at 100 megawatts, we can run it for 8 months. So it's always a choice we make as to how we run it, and that's what we have been doing.
You are generating 250 megawatts in the night. What do you do in the day?
In the day, depending upon what the system requires. Sometimes they will tell us that continue to generate 100 megawatts throughout the day because there's a problem somewhere else in the network, and then we do that. But sometimes they say that we don't really need you during this day, so shut down completely. We shut down completely and wait for when they tell us that this is a good time for you to come in. So we play a role according to what the planners and the operators of the system tell us that we should do to optimally use the water. All this while also noting that when they let us run more hours, then we are taking a shortfall for later on in the dry season, and so it's a balancing act that we have to perform.
But are the managers of the system being very prudent, considering the fact that in Ghana most of the factories and industries and so on work during the daytime? So we are generating actually for people to sleep in air conditioners.
Well, I don't know about the air conditioners, but we are generating. They have a demand, and the demand rises in the evening, and that's when the operators of the national network have the greatest challenges. So they have determined that it's best for us to come in and help them during that period when they are most challenged. That is so.
But should we just be looking at the demand, or should we be looking at the quality of the demand? Because demand for industry doesn't have the same quality as demand for domestic use in terms of the national economy and the national priority.
That is a good question, but it's an issue that cannot be determined by ourselves or by the operators of the national network, and that is when, as a nation, we have to make some decisions about these. For instance, if you are a consumer and you want to buy fuel to go on a joyride, who is to tell you that don't go on a joyride? If you are paying the full price of the fuel and you want to go on a joyride, it's up to you. The problem only comes if you are not paying the full price. If the fuel is being subsidized and then you use it for a joyride, then somebody is supporting your joyride. So economists will tell you this has an issue to do with pricing. If the price is such that it's being subsidized, then you are worried about people wasting it. But if the price, not wasting it, but using it for things that somebody else may not think that it was the best use of that resource. But if you are paying the full price of the resource, then really nobody should be worried that you are paying your way, so nobody should be worried. So this kind of issue comes in only when the price is not right. Then you can debate this. But if every user was paying his full way, it shouldn't be an issue.
But what is the price? Is the price just the city cost, or the social consequences of our actions, the economic consequences of our actions and so on? The price may not just be the city cost.
Yes, it may not just be the city cost, because especially in this case when it is taking resources away from other, let's say,
from
opportunities,
industry, from commerce,
from other opportunities for the So I'm not an economist, but I'm sure the economists would love to discuss this thing extensively. But for us as operators, our responsibility is to do our best to support the national demand, and to support the national demand as determined by the operators of the national network. So when they tell us that given the amount of water you have, this is the best use that we can have for you throughout the year, we do our best to provide that support, and expect that those who are planning it know what they are doing.
So you're an expert. You obviously know a lot more than inquisitive journalists like me and so on. Isn't it problematic, isn't it strange, that after all these years, we don't appear to know the different demands we have on power, and which ones need to be satisfied immediately and which ones need to be satisfied later, or not satisfied at all?
I think that we know what the different sources of the demands are. But where you get into dangerous territory is if you ask us as technical people to determine that this person's use of this resource is okay, this one is not okay, that you should get it, you should not get it, then you are getting into very slippery waters, because we are technical people. How does society determine which is a good use of its resource? And who are the people best placed to determine the good use of this resource? That is one question. If you are going to put in a controlled environment, then you are controlling, okay, you get so much. Then you are getting to the economy of, let's say, what we used to have before, where you buy chits, import chit and so on. Then you say, okay, you get 2 units, you get 1 unit, you get so on. That is one structure of the economy. But the other one tells you to price it right and then ask people to meet whatever, let the people make their choice. And that seems to be the direction we are going, but we don't seem to have reached there yet.
We'll come back to the issue of price because it appears to be quite central in this discussion, you know. But is it true that Akosombo, Pong and Bui all depend on the same water source?
Yes, it's true. It's true that they all depend on the same Grand River Basin. That is the main Volta River Basin. But that itself is not an issue, because when you study the hydrology of all the rivers in Africa, you find that all across Africa is the same. They all follow the same regime. When there's a drought in Ghana, there's a drought across. All the rivers in Africa are having a drought. So it's the same. It's a resource. The resource provides a certain quantity a year. Now, is that good? Is that at a good price? Is that the best, the economic choice? And the answer is yes. That's why we have developed them. Because Akosombo is providing on the average, let's say 5,000 gigawatt hours a year. Bui is providing 1,000 gigawatt hours a year. Now, for the cost of it and so on, it's better to do Bui for its 1,000 than to go and buy crude oil. So we'll build the Bui and run it for its 1,000. So each of them have been looked at, and they are justified by themselves. The fact that they are on the same river basin provides another challenge to us technically, that when you have the drought cycle, you have to have alternate sources that can fill that gap. And that has been one of the challenges that we have been dealing with, or been trying to get on top of, since 1982. The drought from 82, 83, 84 showed us our vulnerability to the hydrologic uncertainties of the Volta Basin. And since then, we have been trying to build enough thermals to complement the hydros and to be able to provide the needs of the country when there's a drought. But in summary, we don't seem to have been able to catch up. We are always playing catch up, and the demand is rising faster than we are building the plants, and that has been the ongoing challenge for us.
Now, talking about hydro and thermal, I hear about what they call the generation mix.
Yes.
What is this generation mix, and is it satisfactory?
I think that what will be satisfactory? What is satisfactory is that you have enough plants to meet your demand, even if there is a drought. If current demands, let's say, are 12,000 per year, 12,000 what we call gigawatt hours a year, and the hydros, Akosombo, Pong, Bui, are providing, let's say, 7,000 or 8,000, then somebody regularly has to provide 4,000 every year. And then the year in which there's a drought and the hydros drop from their 8,000 to, let's say, 4,000, then those other plants have to pick up the balance, which is 8,000. So you have to have that mix such that you are able to meet the demands reliably. And that is what we mean by the good mix. That the mix has to be such that you are able to complement the hydros and meet the demand, both when the hydros are in full production and when there's a drought and they shrink, their production shrinks.
Let's talk about nuclear power. That introduces something new into the mix.
Yes.
Is it viable? Is it sensible? Does it resolve our problems?
Nuclear can make a big contribution, to our demand, to meeting our demands. And the advantage of nuclear is in a way like hydro in terms of its base amount of production, but it's even better than hydro in that sense, because once you switch on a nuclear plant, it's going to be able to virtually produce its full capacity on a stable level, except for outages for maintenance. So it is very good in providing base capacity. The challenge for us in Ghana is that the economic size of a nuclear generating plant is of a certain size, and they tend to be much bigger than our demand can support. So when our demand as a country grows a little bit more, nuclear will become very, very welcome. It will be very welcome.
But there's a lot of demand in the sub-region. Nigeria is having problems with generation. Togo, Benin, all of them are having problems with generation.
Yes.
And given the fact that our systems are linked, isn't the demand there for nuclear generation?
If we were to go into nuclear generation, we'll need much bigger links than we have now. What the links we have now provide sufficient support to the countries. They were targeted at providing support to the neighboring countries. For instance, if you take our link with
La Côte d'Ivoire,
or either La Côte d'Ivoire
or
Togo Benin, our link with La Côte d'Ivoire is capable of, let's say, 200 megawatts. That is what it's capable of. Our links with Togo Benin originally were targeted at meeting a stable requirement of about 65 megawatts. So we built two lines, each one capable of 65 megawatts, so that whatever happens, we can provide them stable supply. If we put the two together, those old lines can provide 30. It's only now that a 330 kV line has been built to increase that capacity. But if we are going to export nuclear power, we will require much stronger and bigger links that can provide. Nuclear, we are talking probably a minimum 2,000 megawatts plus.
So let's build the links and let's produce nuclear. Let's solve our problems.
The finances of the sector will have to be able to support that, because nuclear is very expensive to build initially, and to get somebody to build it, we'll have to guarantee that the sector has enough finances to support that into the long-term future.
But if our neighbors were interested in buying power from us, they'll be paying.
Well, they'll be paying, but our institutions have to be financially sound to be able to underwrite it and to convince somebody that they are strong enough to pay for this for the next 50 years and so build a nuclear plant.
The market survey should deal with that quite easily.
It goes beyond market survey. One, the institution who is guaranteeing it has to demonstrate that its balance sheet is strong enough. And I doubt that at the moment any of our power sector institutions can do
What about expectation of future revenue?
The expectation of future revenue is also linked to a clear understanding on the tariffing regime. The tariffing regime has to be predictable, and those people have to be sure that the tariffs will be what the rules say it will be, and that they will be paid and they will be collected and they will have it available.
What about the mini hydro projects? I heard about the mini hydro projects in the 1960s. You're still talking about mini hydros.
Yes.
And it doesn't appear that we've done enough with the mini hydro projects.
Yes. Well, a lot of work is going on now on the mini hydros. But compared to, let's say, a project like Bui, when you have a project like Bui, it's far more attractive than the mini hydros for obvious reasons, the economies of scale and so on, the cost of production and so on. So the big hydros have tended to gain priority over the mini hydros. But after the completion of Bui, there isn't another site in Ghana that has more than 100 megawatts all the remaining sites now for hydro development are less than 100. So focus is beginning to shift to the small-scale hydros, and you will be seeing quite a number of them coming up. Indeed, we are maintaining skilled technical workforce ready to support the government in developing the new and the smaller and the mini hydros.
Welcome back to Hot Issues, and we are talking about power generation, power distribution, doomsaw, and all. And we are particularly privileged to have somebody who knows quite a lot. Mr. Jabesh Amissah, the Chief Executive Officer of the Bui Power Authority. So just before we went on break, I wanted to understand what the problem was. Is it generation? Is it distribution? A combination of all or more? What is the problem?
The problem that we are seeing of late is predominantly a generation problem. The service quality of the distribution network has been with us for a while, but right now the major load shedding and so on that is occurring is predominantly because of generation inadequacy. That is what is driving this.
Generation inadequacy. Is it also just because the water level has fallen, or there are other factors?
The water level has fallen, and it's a contributory factor. But there are other factors, as we know. Challenges with fuel. Fuel, both in the liquid form and in the gas form, has been a challenge. So those are the contributory factors. As I was explaining, the hydros can do very well for several years, but every now and then you get a drought sequence, and then their production has to diminish. Now, when that production diminishes, that is when the thermals have to step up their game and cover for the hydros. They have not been able, the thermals that we have not been able to cover, and that is the problem we are seeing. Either because there's an interruption in the gas supply, which everybody has heard about, I'm sure, or there are challenges with liquid fuel and the procurement of liquid fuel. And those have been the two big.
So what are these challenges with the procurement of fuel?
The procurement of fuel is primarily financial.
So we are broke.
The institutions that have to procure the fuel are in financial difficulties, and they are unable to fund it themselves.
Perhaps you are not the person to confirm, but just in case, is it true that the VRA alone is indebted to the tune of about $180 million?
I don't know the number I don't know the number.
When you were there, what was the number?
Well, what I can tell you is that the fuel costs are very high when they have to use liquid fuel. I think that at current prices, they are talking of something like $70 to $80 million per cargo. And they burn that cargo within 3 weeks. If the thermal plants are running for, within 3 weeks, they burn $70 to $80 million worth of crude oil, and they have to buy another cargo. And you ought to have ordered the cargo well ahead for it to arrive in time. And if there's any delay in being able to establish the LCs to make the fuel come, then you get into some of these difficulties, that you don't have enough fuel to run all the thermals and so on.
Are we not sometimes the architects of our own doom? I mean, considering the fact that we are giving considerable power to Valco, which can never pay.
Well, I don't know about can never pay. That I'll leave that for Valco to say.
If you look at the economics of their production, they can never pay, and they've never paid.
I've heard Valco make the argument that at the current production levels, they will not be able to pay. I've heard that.
So why are we supplying power to them and creating a huge hole in the accounts of the VRA, in the accounts of everybody? Why are we doing that?
Well, the economists again will have to look at the wider implications of supplying or not supplying power to VALCO or VALCO shutting down. What are the external effects of VALCO shutting down? And they will have to take all that into consideration to make the decision whether they should allow VALCO to remain open or shut it down. If it was a straight question of power economics, that the price they pay for the power versus so and so on, that it would have been a straightforward question. But when you are dealing with industries like that, which have a whole chain of other industries dependent upon them, which have a large workforce in the city, there are wider economic considerations that are taken into consideration in determining whether they should stay open or not.
But I've seen documents, one authored by Professor Akila Kwaswaya, who was chairman of the board of the VRE, and one by the immediate past chief executive of VRE, suggesting that it makes no sense to continue to supply VALCO. No economic sense whatsoever.
Well, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the documents. I haven't seen their determinations, but I can confirm that from their perspective.
They are saying, for example, that the subsidy that VALCO enjoys now is more than sufficient to pay all the workers of VALCO for doing no work. The power supply situation would have been much, much better if we paid the workers of VALCO for doing no work.
Well, I respect Prof very much, so I have to respect his views on this. But what about the other industries that depend on VALCO?
Downstream industries.
But
the ingots can be gotten from anywhere.
Well, but it costs them a lot more to do so.
No, the study suggests that it wouldn't cost them a lot more.
Well,
there's a certain fixation with VALCO. It's only a fixation.
I have not studied the wider economic implications of VALCO, so I can't speak to this. Probably Prof and the rest have. There may be others who have a different view from that. Must be why VALCO is still open. So yes, I'm sure that from way back in the 80s, many people have had the view that we'll be better off without VALCO. Certainly, the power sector would have been better off without VALCO. But whether Ghana as a whole will be better off without VALCO is where I think there are differences. And it also depends on what you want to do or what you have in your plans for that industry. Whether, if for instance, one expected that you would be able to finally realize the bauxite aluminium chain in a near term, then you may have an incentive for keeping VALCO running with the expectation that in the near future you are going to have the whole industry integrated. So I'm sure that there are wider economic considerations that lead people to say that keep them open, and that lead others to say no, shut it down. But I'm not privy to the full details of all these considerations. So I just understand that everybody has this view.
Okay, we will leave that aside for the moment. Can we then say that Atuabo can solve the problem?
Atuabo can go a long way. Just like Bui didn't solve the problem by itself. At the current demand, no single plant can by itself solve the shortfalls in Ghana. It has to be a collection of production sources performing to meet the requirement. No single plant can. Abuazi alone, Atuabo alone, cannot solve the problem. If Atuabo is providing all the gas that it can provide, and still there's a shortfall from Nigeria, we'll still have a problem. So it requires Atuabo to be performing. It requires the Nigeria gas to be flowing at least a certain quantity. It requires Bui and Akosombo and all the others to be playing their role to be able to solve the problem.
That's interesting. So why did we create the impression that Atuabo was going to fix it all?
Atuabo is
certainly not by you, but some of the politicians and political heavyweights.
Well, if you ask me from the technical perspective, each of these plans make a contribution towards, and it depends on what the shortfall is. Let's say that if the shortfall was less than what we alone could provide, we would have solved the problem. But if the shortfall is bigger than Bui, then we can only contribute its share and hope that somebody else will pick up the balance. So that is the way it is. The time when Akosombo alone could meet all the needs of Ghana and Togo and Benin all together, those times are past. Our demands have far exceeded that, and no single plant, not even Akosombo, can meet our demands. Akosombo will have to play its part. Everybody else will have to play its part in order to meet the demand. That is how complex and how large our power network has become now.
Sir, is it true that you are involved in negotiating the second compact, Millennium Challenge account? Is it true?
Yes. I was part of the team that prepared the scope of work. It was actually I was part of a team that was what we call the Joint Country Action Plan on the Partnership for Growth with the U.S. government. What we did was previous work had determined that there were two dominant constraints to growth in Ghana. The first constraint was access to finance credit. Access to credit was one. The second one was access to power. And so we were working on the power side to identify what the constraints were and work with our partners, that is the U.S. government agencies, to determine what actions we needed to take to overcome these constraints. And that is how those programs were developed.
What are we going to do? Are we going to set up new thermal generation plants? Who is going to set them up and so on? What are we going to do with distribution and so on? Specifics.
Well, okay. One of the things we are going to do on the generation side is, first of all, to make sure that the institutions that have to buy the power in order to deliver to consumers have the financial health to be able to do so. And that the framework for new entrants into the generation market is clear and it makes for good competition to bring in the best price generation that can come in. So that is broadly what we are doing on what it seeks to do on the generation.
That is the regulatory framework.
The regulatory framework, the framework for competitive procurement of new plants is all agreed and so on. It is done properly, and we have a model for it that works and that can deliver these things. And then, most importantly, the institutions that have to buy the power from these agencies have the financial health and to do so, and they can convince the people to come and build a plant for them. So that is what is going on the primarily on the generation side. On the transmission and distribution side, is also to deal with their financial health, because it's like a chain. If the retailer is not financially healthy, it cannot pay the transmission company, who is a bulk transmitter who delivers to him. They cannot pay the generation company, and it continues going backwards. And that is one of the challenges that we have seen. So the retailer has to be efficient, he has to be financially healthy, such that the rest can also depend on him for the purchase. So one of the things is to do that. And then we looked at the challenges for the retailer. What are the power thefts? How can we address power theft? How can we address all the other sources of technical losses? The problems that consumers have is the quality of service. We look at what needs to be done to improve the quality of service. How are we going to measure these, and what are the indicators we are going to use, and what actions are going to be taken to improve the quality of service, to reduce the losses, to improve collection. And we looked at all the challenges in these and see how do we address these so that they can be sorted out.
Okay. Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues. So we are looking at power, electricity, and we are very, very fortunate to have with us an expert, indeed the Chief Executive Officer of the Bui Power Authority, Mr. Jabesh Amissah Atta. And just before we went on the break, I raised the very, very controversial issue. Are we selling ECG or not?
there's no intention to sell ECG. What I know we have discussed on the technical level is to figure out how private participation in the business of delivering electricity to consumers can help us improve the service. So how do we, is there a way we can bring in private actors into what the business of delivering good service, such that we can improve the service to the consumer? And to the extent that there are ways that can happen, we think that we should allow it to happen. We can find good ways to let that happen. So, for instance, there are things that have been tried and that are constantly being tried as to getting private sector involved. For instance, is there a way private sector can get involved in, let's say, the retail, in the delivery of electricity bills, in the collection of the bills, such that they improve the efficiency of these things? Is there a way to bring private entities into the way, if there's an outage, the line is repaired, such that they perform, the performance can go up? So that's what we have been looking at. Always we can leverage private participation to improve the quality of service and to improve the delivery of electricity.
Private participation can also lead to a deterioration of service.
It could also lead to a deterioration.
So it is no guarantee for
it. It is no guarantee. That's why you have to look carefully at it. In which areas can private participation improve the performance?
But why should it be private that improves? Why is it not possible for the state also to improve the service? The VRA, which you led for some time, was state. It functioned. It was one of the most efficient institutions in this country.
Yeah.
What is the problem?
Well, I can't tell generally what the problem is, but it's also true that when you get a private person looking after a small area, because of the focus and attention that he can give it, sometimes they are able to perform better. Sometimes. But it's not guaranteed.
Yeah.
It can be worse. So you have to be very careful and selective in how you go about this. And
so what is the principled basis for privatization? If it may or may not work, then what is the principled basis for privatization?
As I said, what we did at the technical level was to look at it and say, in which areas is it possible that, let's say, outsourcing can make it more efficient for us? Let's take an example. The state agencies at one time were collecting garbage. An attempt was made to bring in privates. Did private improve it? Maybe yes, no. They were able to, they were not able to. So you can look at it. Why is it that when you bring in private, they are able to, let's say, perform better in terms of garbage collection?
But that is not true. That assumption is not true.
Well, I'm saying that
even if it comes to garbage collection,
yes,
it cannot be true.
Well, I'm saying what you look at is there some area where you think that private participation, outsourcing, let's say, can improve the delivery of service? If yes, do you want to try it or you don't want to try it? That is what we have to discuss.
Yeah, but you see, what I'm looking for is the empirical basis for making that decision. The empirical basis for making the assumption that in this sector, in this small area or big area, the private sector would do better. And there's no empirical basis.
Well, the proponents for private sector participation will give examples outside the country and other places where this has been tried, and in some with mixed results, some with positive results, some with negative results. So one has to look carefully and choose your own path that you are convinced will work for you or work in our
But we do know that privatization is not necessarily an answer. It can be a very bad answer sometimes.
It can go wrong.
We tried it in the water sector.
It can
even for electricity. You remember that we brought in the Electricity Company of France.
Yes.
To help us with our billing system and collection of tariffs and so on. It was a total failure. We lost 180 million cedis as a result of that. 128 million cedis was lost.
Well, efforts have been made, and we have to learn from those lessons. Yes, there was an effort to bring, I think the French came in at one time, the Irish had been here before, and so on. We have to learn lessons from what worked in that case, what didn't work. So what should we try? What should we not try? And all of these have to be looked at. All these experiences have to be analyzed.
How can we think, that a company based in France can come and collect tariffs in Nima and Mamobi? They have no idea what Nima looks like.
So, but private sector participation, for me, doesn't necessarily mean foreign.
Okay. What kinds of investment are we talking about here? Because the kinds of investments we're talking about could necessarily, ab initio, exclude Ghanaian investors.
So you have to see what the segment you choose, what does it require? Is that a segment that Ghanaian private enterprise can do well in? Or is that an enterprise that Ghanaian entrepreneurs may not be able to perform because of the capital required, or because of the funding required, or because of the expertise required? So you have to look and be very deliberate in how you go about this. That is my view.
So at least the workers of the Electricity Company of Ghana were not totally wrong when they said that aspects of the operations may be privatized or will be privatized.
I think that the thing is that it has to be looked at where there could be benefits for the consumer in incorporating private sector participation. I think that one has to look at it and see whether we think that it will be beneficial to us and to the consumer and to the quality of service and so on and to the efficiencies. Then we give it a try and have some measurements to see where we determine that it's working well, and if it's not working well, what do we do? But I think that there's no harm in trying to improve the situation.
Is that a condition from the United States of America?
It is a requirement that we look at that, and government decides how private sector participation will be.
But it's certainly forward. A condition from the United
that
States
to
of
look
America.
at it and make the government to make a determination. Yes. But the process is now going on, if I understand, the process is now going on to determine what scope.
But why do we accept these conditions from the United States of America, from the European Union, and from all kinds of governments and institutions, when we have experts like you? When you know our systems much better, why do we go to the United States of America to give us conditions?
I don't look at it as conditionalities.
Yes, sir.
We have looked at it. Sometimes we have looked at it independent of where the idea came from. Let's say an idea comes. I think that we should look at the merits of the idea and forget whether it came from A, in-house, or B, outside. Is the idea meritorious? Does it have prospects for improving our situation? And let's consider it on its merits. And that's how we have tried to look at it from the technical perspective.
The problem is that we've been considering it for close to 30 years, and we're going down and down and down and down. We've lost our national airline. We've lost our Black Star line. We've lost control over our fishing industry. We are losing control over our financial sector. Everything is going down. We've been trying this prescription for 30 years. There's nothing positive to show for it.
Which prescription are you referring to? Because as far as I know,
unbridled privatization, doctrinaire privatization, irrational privatization.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm qualified to discuss the privatization in that global sense, but sometimes it's you get to a point where you have to look at what is happening and see if, let's say, we are unable to deliver the service, then certainly we are inviting somebody to give it a try to do something to improve. As you are saying, if we are going down and down and down and down, you have to look at it and see what can we do to improve this quality of service, and we have to look at all the options on the table, and I think that it's only proper and it's only for the consumer that in the power sector we do that look, there are complaints about our quality of service. We have tried so many other things. What can we try next to see if we can improve the quality of service that we are delivering to the consumer, and not exclude any options and look at each one on its merits, irrespective of where it came from. There are experiments being run on different schemes in the country to see if the service can improve, and all of them have to be assessed to choose the best way forward.
So you are the expert. There's been talk about alternative sources. Mm-hmm. And recently we are told that Infant Supreme School, for example, is doing very well with biogas. What is your view? Should we be encouraging the search for alternatives, or the utilization of alternatives like biogas, like wind, like solar, and so on? Would that help us to deal with our current situation?
I think that in the long term, they could play a more than significant role. And so we should look at them. There are things that are helpful in meeting the needs we have. For instance, solar water heating. Solar water heating has been proven to be very helpful in other places, and with the sunshine, we don't need to use any other source to heat water, whether it's gas or LPG or electricity. So we have to look at those sources. But sometimes my fear and my worry is that those alternate sources are sometimes oversold, and they are overpromised as if it will solve all the problems. As I've said, they won't by themselves solve all the problems. They will help mitigate some of the demands, but they won't solve the problem. For instance, we will not very quickly get into a situation where solar power will power industry. Anybody who sells the solar idea to that level is overselling it and setting us up for disappointment later. And technically, I'm not in the business of overselling any scheme. They can contribute, but let's not oversell them. We still need the conventional power plants to deliver the energy largely for our industries. On isolated basis, on an individual basis, some of these alternates, wind and so on, can make a contribution. But we will still need conventional plants, and we'll still need to build them fast to be able to cope with demand.
So, sometimes interviewers like me are allowed the liberty to ask questions which may even be silly. Now, I'm sure that our viewers are watching you, and you look so much like His Excellency, our Vice President. Is there a connection?
Yes.
What is the connection?
He's my big brother.
Big brother?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for coming to the studio, sir.
Thank you too for having me.
Yes, well, viewers, we've listened to Mr. Jabesh Amissah Atta, the Chief Executive Officer of the Bui Power Authority, and you've heard it all. The problems, the inadequacy of financing, the problems with distribution, and so on. What else can we say? Just keep your dial on TV3, because the best in everything is on TV3. See you again next week. Bye-bye from all of us from TV3.